Chapter 11 Muff Potter Goes to Jail. Near noon, the whole village was suddenly shocked with the horrible news of the murder in the graveyard. Everyone heard the story. The teacher gave holiday for the afternoon and closed the school. A bloody knife had been found close to the murdered doctor. The knife had been recognized by somebody as belonging to Muff Potter. Another person said that he had come upon Potter washing himself in the river, and that Potter had sneaked off about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. The town had been searched for him, but he could not be found. The sheriff and his men were looking for him. All the town was going to the graveyard. Tom forgot about his heartbreak. He joined the crowd. He really didn't want to go, but something drew him on. At the dreadful place, Tom squeezed through the crowd and saw the sight again. It seemed years since last night. Somebody pinched his arm. He turned and his eyes met Huckleberry's. Then both looked away so no one would notice their glances. But everyone was talking about the murder. Poor fella. Poor young fella. This ought to be a lesson to those grave robbers. Muff Potter will hang for this, for sure. It was judgment. God's hand is here. Now Tom shivered from head to heel. He saw Injun Joe, and at that moment the crowd began to move, and voices shouted, "There he is! He's coming himself!" "Who?" 20 voices asked. "Muff Potter." He stopped, looked out. "He's turning. Don't let him get away." But Muff Potter wasn't trying to get away. He's only puzzled. But a person said, "Look at him. He wants to come and take a look at his work, but he didn't expect any company." The sheriff took Potter by the arm and brought him through the crowd. When Potter stood before the murdered man, he shook, put his face in his hands, and burst into tears. I didn't do it, friends," he sobbed. "Upon my word, I never." "Who said you did?" shouted a voice. This seemed to carry home. Potter lifted his face and looked around sadly. He saw Injun Joe and exclaimed, "Oh, Joe, you promised me you'd never—" "Is that your knife?" demanded the sheriff. Potter would have fainted if he had not caught him and eased him to the ground. And then he said, "Something told me if I didn't come back and get—" He stopped. Then he waved his hand as if to give up and say, "Tell him, Joe, tell him. It's no use anymore." Huck and Tom stood silent and stared at Injun Joe as he lied about what happened. The boys expected every moment that God would send a lightning down on Joe's head to stop his lying. But when they finished the story and he still stood, they were sure Injun Joe had sold himself to the devil. Somebody asked, "Why didn't you run away? Why did you want to come back here for anyway?" Top of page 65. "I couldn't help it," Potter moaned. "I wanted to, but I couldn't seem to go anywhere but here." He fell upon his knees again. Injun Joe told his story again. A few minutes later, it was official. The boys were sure now that he belonged to the devil. They made up their minds to watch Joe nights whenever they could, so they could get a look at his master, the devil. Injun Joe helped to put the body of the murdered doctor in a wagon to take it away. Some people in the crowd whispered that blood came from the body, and that the boys thought that it would prove that the person who killed him or killed the doctor, but others said it's within 3 feet of Muff Potter when the blood came. Tom's terrible secret and his mind disturbed his sleep for as much as a week after this. So he was having nightmares. He knows the truth, but he can't say because of the oath. One morning at breakfast, Sid said, "Tom, you rolled around and talked in your sleep so much that it kept me awake half the time." Tom turned white and dropped his eyes. "That's a bad sign," said Aunt Polly. "What have you got on your mind, Tom?" Nothing, I know of nothing." But Tom's hand shook and he spilt his milk. "And you talked such stuff," said Sid. "Last night you said, it's blood, and that's what it is. You said that over and over, and then you said, I'll tell what? What will you tell?" Everything was swimming before Tom. He might have told what happened in the graveyard, but Aunt Polly said, "It's a dreadful murder. I dream about it almost every night myself. Sometimes I dream that I did it." Mary said that she dreams too. Sid seemed satisfied, but Tom got out of the room as fast as he could. After that, Tom decided not to take any chances. He complained of a toothache for a week and tied up his jaw every night. He never knew that Sid listened every night and often slipped the bandage off to hear him better. Soon Tom's troublesome mind wore off and the toothache did not grow bothersome. and it has stopped. If Sid really made anything out of Tom's sleep talking, he kept it to himself. Tom didn't care for dead cats anymore. When his schoolmates tried to find out who died or who brought the dead cat, Tom stayed away. Sid noticed that and was surprised because it was more like Tom to take the lead in things like that. However, it wasn't long before the inquest went out of style, and Tom wasn't bothered anymore. Every day or two during this time, Tom watched his chance and went to the jail window to give Muff Potter some small comfort as Tom could get a hold of. The jail was a small brick building in a marsh and at the edge of the village. No guards were there. The people had a strong desire to tar and feather Injun Joe and chase him out of town for body stealing. But Joe was so dreaded, nobody was willing to start the matter. He had been careful to tell of the fight, but not of the grave robbing. It was thought best not to try him in court at present, so the matter was dropped. So Injun Joe gets away with murder, all right? He's off scot-free.